What happens when entitlement meets justice? In today's story, a wealthy heiress learns that no amount of privilege can shield you from the consequences of your actions. Meet Chloe Fairchild, a notorious socialite whose name often makes headlines for all the wrong reasons. Known for her reckless behavior and unapologetic attitude, Chloe has a reputation for living life on her terms, regardless of the consequences. Today, she's standing before Judge Marcus Bennett, a man renowned for his no-nonsense demeanor and unwavering commitment to justice. Judge Bennett, respected throughout the legal community, has built a career on holding everyone regardless of their status accountable for their actions. The courtroom is packed, buzzing with anticipation. Chloe's high-profile lifestyle and the media attention surrounding her latest stunt, a reckless driving incident that endangered a pedestrian, have drawn a crowd of curious onlookers. As murmurs fill the room, the tension is palpable. All eyes are on Chloe as she saunters in, dressed in designer labels and exuding an air of indifference. But what starts as a routine hearing will soon transform into a life-altering lesson, as Judge Bennett prepares to deliver a verdict that will leave everyone speechless. The courthouse was already bustling with activity when Chloe Fairchild made her grand entrance. Fashionably late and unapologetic, dressed in a pristine white blazer, oversized sunglasses, and sky-high designer heels, she looked more prepared for a red carpet than a courtroom. As the heavy doors swung open, her confident stride was interrupted by the collective stares of the courtroom audience. Trailing behind her, her lawyer, a middle-aged man with a weary expression, seemed eager to minimize the attention she drew. Chloe, however, seemed entirely unfazed. She paused midway down the aisle, blocking others from taking their seats, and removed her sunglasses with dramatic flair, tossing them into her luxury handbag. She motioned for her lawyer to take her belongings. The room, which had been buzzing with quiet murmurs, fell silent as Judge Marcus Bennett entered. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise." Chloe hesitated for a moment, her irritation evident, before letting out a heavy sigh and standing. Her dismissive attitude stood in stark contrast to the solemnity of the courtroom, where even the most seasoned onlookers sat in respectful silence. As the proceedings began, Chloe leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms and exuding an air of defiance. Judge Bennett, known for his piercing gaze and calm authority, began outlining the charges against her: multiple parking violations compounded by a reckless driving incident that endangered a pedestrian. But what could have been a straightforward hearing quickly took a dramatic turn. Chloe's lawyer leaned over to whisper something to her, likely a reminder to behave. She waved him off with a flick of her manicured hand, her nails tapping loudly on the wooden table. As Judge Bennett asked her to confirm her identity, Chloe barely glanced up. "Yeah, that's me," she replied, her tone dripping with indifference. A collective murmur rippled through the room, but Chloe was unfazed. When Judge Bennett calmly reminded her to maintain decorum, she smirked and twirled a strand of her blonde hair. "Sure thing, Your Honor," she said mockingly, her sarcasm sending soft gasps through the crowd. Even as the judge continued outlining her offenses, Chloe's arrogance remained unchecked. She audibly sighed, rolled her eyes, and muttered under her breath, "This is such a waste of time." Each display of disrespect only served to heighten the tension in the room, where even the most seasoned court regulars could sense something monumental was brewing. Judge Bennett paused briefly, closing the folder in front of him and removing his glasses. His calm expression didn't waver, but his tone grew sharper. "Miss Fairchild," he began, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "in this courtroom, we adhere to a certain level of respect and accountability. I suggest you reconsider your approach before proceeding further." The room grew silent, the audience hanging on to every word. Chloe's smirk faltered for a moment, but her defiance soon returned. She shrugged and muttered, "Whatever." Judge Bennett leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. "This is not a discussion, Miss Fairchild. This is a legal proceeding, and your actions today will have consequences." His calm but firm demeanor foreshadowed the storm about to unfold. As the courtroom settled, Judge Marcus Bennett turned his attention to a file before him. "Miss Fairchild," he began, his voice steady, "do you recall the incident from 2 weeks ago that brought you here today?" Chloe's confidence remained intact. She shrugged, leaning back in her chair. "Yeah. Some guy stepped off the curb. I honked. He moved." "End of story," she said, her tone flippant. Judge Bennett raised an eyebrow and looked toward the gallery. "Let the record show that the pedestrian in question, Mr. Edward Lopez, is here with us today." All eyes turned toward the second row, where an elderly man sat quietly. His arm was in a sling, his face weathered but kind. Chloe's bravado wavered slightly as Judge Bennett described Mr. Lopez, a 67-year-old retired teacher, beloved in his community, who was crossing the street legally when Chloe accelerated toward him. The sudden action caused him to stumble, fall, and injure his wrist. The incident left Mr. Lopez in pain. Judge Bennett continued, "requiring medical attention and ongoing treatment. But the true impact extends beyond physical harm. Imagine, Miss Fairchild, the fear of not knowing whether a car speeding toward you will stop in time." Chloe glanced nervously at her lawyer, who whispered something to her. For the first time, she hesitated. The weight of the moment began to sink in as she avoided looking at Mr. Lopez, who sat silently, his expression one of quiet disappointment rather than anger. Judge Bennett leaned forward slightly, his sharp gaze locking onto Chloe. "Miss Fairchild," he said, his tone calm but firm, "this courtroom is not merely a place for punishment. It is a place for reflection and accountability. And today, it is clear to me that you have yet to grasp the gravity of your actions." Chloe's confidence visibly crumbled under his words. She crossed her arms defensively but didn't interrupt. "The law does not measure accountability by the size of the crime," Judge Bennett continued, "but by the impact of the actions. Your reckless behavior could have cost a man his life. Instead of recognizing the seriousness of this, you have chosen to dismiss it as trivial." The judge's voice grew heavier with emotion. "You sit here, privileged and entitled, acting as though this courtroom is beneath you. But privilege is not an excuse for recklessness, nor does it exempt you from responsibility." Chloe shifted uncomfortably in her seat as Judge Bennett's words reverberated through the room. "Empathy, Miss Fairchild," he said, "is the foundation of accountability. To truly understand the consequences of your actions, you must see beyond yourself. This is not just about Mr. Lopez, though his pain is evident. This is about the precedent we set when we allow those with privilege to believe they are above the law." The room was silent, the tension almost tangible. Even Chloe's lawyer appeared captivated by the judge's speech. Judge Bennett concluded with a final, weighty statement, "Miss Fairchild, justice is not about humiliation. It is about education. Today, this court will give you an opportunity to learn what it means to take responsibility not just for your actions, but for the impact they have on others." As the judge's words hung in the air, Chloe's confidence was replaced by a flicker of unease. She leaned back in her chair, her usual defiance stripped away as the courtroom braced for what would come next. Judge Marcus Bennett paused, allowing a heavy silence to fill the courtroom. He carefully adjusted his glasses and opened a folder. "Miss Fairchild," he began, his voice calm but commanding. The charges brought against you, combined with your behavior today, require this court to take decisive action. Chloe sat up straighter, her usual air of defiance beginning to crack. This court fines you $5,000 for your violations, which must be paid within 30 days, the judge continued. You will also complete 200 hours of community service. Additionally, you are required to attend a court-ordered sensitivity training program focused on empathy and accountability. Chloe rolled her eyes, muttering under her breath. But Judge Bennett pressed on, undeterred. And finally, he said, his voice slightly firmer, you will spend the next 30 days volunteering at the downtown women's shelter. Each morning, you will report at 8 a.m. and fulfill duties assigned by the shelter staff. Weekly progress reports will be submitted to this court to ensure compliance. Chloe's jaw dropped, and her face flushed with anger. You can't be serious, she exclaimed, her voice rising. You want me to work with homeless people? That's not my problem. Judge Bennett raised a hand, silencing her outburst. Miss Fairchild, let me be clear, he said, his tone icy. Failure to comply with any part of this sentence will result in a far harsher punishment, including potential jail time. Do I make myself clear? Chloe slumped back in her seat, her expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. As murmurs spread through the courtroom, Judge Bennett leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. Miss Fairchild, he said, this sentence is not meant to humiliate you, but to help you. Your privilege has shielded you from accountability for too long, and that has eroded your ability to empathize with others. This court seeks to change that. The room fell silent as he continued. Mr. Edward Lopez, the man you endangered, had the opportunity to request harsher penalties. Instead, he chose grace over anger. When asked about his feelings, Mr. Lopez said something this court will not forget. I don't want her to suffer. I just want her to understand. Because if she doesn't, she'll keep hurting people. And one day, it might be something she can't undo. Chloe glanced at Mr. Lopez for the first time, her bravado fading as she met his quiet, resolute gaze. Judge Bennett's voice softened slightly. Mr. Lopez is not seeking retribution, Miss Fairchild. He is seeking growth. And that is what this court is giving you, an opportunity to reflect, to understand, and to change. The judge let the weight of his words settle before continuing. The women at the shelter you will serve come from circumstances vastly different from your own. Many have faced unimaginable challenges. Their resilience and strength can teach you the humility and accountability you currently lack. Chloe opened her mouth as if to protest, but her lawyer placed a firm hand on her arm, signaling her to remain silent. Judge Bennett delivered his final words with gravity. Miss Fairchild, justice is not about punishment alone. It is about restoring balance and offering a chance for redemption. Use this opportunity wisely, because one day, your choices may not just impact a stranger, they may impact someone you love. With that, the judge raised his gavel and brought it down sharply. This court is adjourned. The room remained silent, the gravity of the moment lingering. Chloe sat frozen, her usual arrogance replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. As though, for the first time, the reality of her actions and their consequences was beginning to sink in. Chloe Fairchild arrived at the downtown women's shelter just after 8 a.m., her designer sunglasses firmly in place, masking the unease in her eyes. The modest brick building stood in stark contrast to the luxurious spaces she was accustomed to. She hesitated at the door, clutching her phone like a lifeline, before finally stepping inside. The atmosphere was bustling but welcoming. Volunteers moved with purpose, chatting as they prepared meals and organized supplies. A woman in her 40s approached Chloe, her no-nonsense demeanor softened by a warm smile. "You must be Chloe," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Maria, the volunteer coordinator. Let's get you started." Chloe's discomfort was evident as Maria led her through the shelter. She passed women and children sitting in the common room, some chatting quietly, others lost in thought. Their worn faces and tired eyes hinted at struggles Chloe couldn't begin to imagine. Maria explained that many of the guests were rebuilding their lives after fleeing domestic violence, losing jobs, or facing other hardships. Chloe's first task was in the kitchen, helping to prepare breakfast. She moved awkwardly, and used to manual labor, and struggled to keep up. She avoided eye contact with the shelter's guests, feeling out of place and overwhelmed. The vibrant chatter and camaraderie among the staff only highlighted how isolated she felt. For the first time, Chloe realized just how far she was from her world of privilege. As the days passed, Chloe began to settle into her role. The first breakthrough came during a quiet lunch service. She handed a tray of food to a woman named Linda, who thanked her with a warm smile. Taking a seat nearby, Linda began sharing her story unprompted. "I used to be like you," Linda said, her voice steady. "Had a good job, a house, and a family. Then one bad decision turned my life upside down. My husband left. I lost my job, and I ended up here." Her eyes met Chloe's. "Life can change in ways you don't expect. Don't take it for granted." Chloe was struck by Linda's words, her usual defenses faltering. Over the next few days, similar stories began to emerge. A young woman named Carla spoke about fleeing an abusive relationship with nothing but her 2 children. Another guest, a retired nurse named Evelyn, recounted how medical bills had cost her everything. One afternoon, Chloe was assigned to help a teenage girl, Mia, with her homework. Mia's resilience and determination to succeed despite her circumstances left Chloe speechless. "You're so strong," Chloe said, genuinely moved. Mia smiled. "You don't have a choice when you're fighting for your future." These interactions began to change Chloe. She started asking questions, listening more, and observing the strength and solidarity among the shelter's guests. For the first time, she saw beyond her own world and into the lives of people who had faced unimaginable challenges yet continued to persevere. One evening, as Chloe helped clean the dining area, she paused to watch the guests laughing together. It struck her how much hope could exist even in the face of adversity. Maria approached her quietly. "You're starting to get it, aren't you?" she asked. Chloe nodded, tears welling up. "I think I am." By the end of her service, Chloe wasn't the same person who had walked through the shelter's doors. The entitlement and arrogance that once defined her had been replaced by humility and a newfound appreciation for the strength of others. The lessons she learned at the shelter weren't just about the struggles of its guests, they were about the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of compassion. The courtroom was quieter this time as Chloe Fairchild entered, a stark contrast to her first appearance. Gone were the oversized sunglasses and designer bravado. Instead, she wore simple, professional attire, her posture more subdued. When Judge Marcus Bennett called her case, Chloe rose to address him. Her voice, once laced with sarcasm, now carried sincerity. "Your Honor," she began, "I want to thank you for not giving up on me. Volunteering at the shelter changed the way I see the world and myself." Judge Bennett studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Miss Fairchild," he replied, The purpose of this sentence was not just to serve justice, but to inspire growth. I am glad to see you have taken this opportunity seriously. The true measure of your progress will be what you choose to do with the lessons you've learned. Chloe nodded, a flicker of determination in her eyes. I intend to do better. Your Honor. Not just for myself, but for others. Judge Bennett offered a small but approving smile. That's a good start, he said. Court adjourned. As Chloe left the courthouse, she felt lighter, as if shedding the weight of her past arrogance. Her time at the shelter had shown her the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of empathy, qualities she had never truly appreciated before. In an interview later that week, Chloe reflected on her transformation. I went into that shelter thinking it was a punishment, she admitted. But it turned out to be a gift. The women I met taught me more about strength and compassion than I could have ever imagined. The impact of Judge Bennett's sentence rippled beyond Chloe's personal growth. The story sparked discussions about privilege, accountability, and the power of second chances. For Chloe, the journey was far from over, but she was determined to use her platform for good. I can't change who I was, she said, but I can change who I'm becoming. And with that, Chloe Fairchild embarked on a new chapter, armed with humility and a renewed sense of purpose. This story reminds us that privilege can often blind us to the struggles of others, but it also shows that with accountability and a willingness to change, anyone can grow. What do you think about Chloe's transformation and Judge Bennett's unique sentence? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your perspective in the comments below. Have you experienced a moment that changed the way you see the world? Let us know. And let's start a conversation about the power of empathy and understanding. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real-life stories that inspire and move us all. As Chloe's journey shows, growth often comes from stepping outside of our comfort zones and seeing life through someone else's eyes. It's not always easy, but it's the first step toward becoming a better, more compassionate person. In the end, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. Understanding others' perspectives can help us build stronger, more connected communities. Thank you for watching. And remember, every story has the power to teach us something new. Stay tuned for more inspiring tales. And until next time, take care and keep growing.